A man trying to sell a blind horse always praises its feet. Again, a man trying to sell a blind horse always praises its feet. And that's a German proverb. So this came to mind of someone not stating their obvious faults. Now, this is what I mean by this, because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that you should highlight your weaknesses. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you should highlight the things that you can't do all that well. If anything, you should concentrate and spotlight the things that you can do effectively. What I am saying, the way I'm interpreting this quote is, if you have an obvious weakness and you're in a position of authority, or you are in a position of teaching someone, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of like political figures or gurus or religious people, this is one of the things why when they make the tiniest of mistakes, the media not the media, the public just destroys them. It's not that people are supposed to be perfect. It's not that. It's that if you're gonna ostracize or you're gonna try to teach someone something, when you coming from a point of I'm almighty, I'm like all perfect, you better not have any skeletons in your closet. Some of the best books, the best audio programs that I read are the ones that have been through similar or worse situations than I am, that has a right to talk about what they're talking about. It's nothing worse than someone trying to talk about something that they have no experience about. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying if they're going to do it, it just better not mess up. It's pretty much what I'm saying. It's like this, going back to the quote, like a guy is trying to sell a horse. Matter of fact, say he's trying to sell that horse as a racing horse. He's trying to sell that horse as a racing horse, right? And he's with the buyer, and he's like, hey man, heard you've been looking for a racing horse. I got one for you. And it's obvious that this horse is blind, but he hasn't mentioned that. He hasn't mentioned that this horse is blind. And the guy's like, okay, I have been looking for a horse, but this horse is blind. And then the salesman is like, yeah, he's blind, but those feet though, look at those feet. Those feet are awesome. And he's like, no man, he's a blind horse. I know all that, don't pay attention to that. Those feet. It's the same way when you're selling something on eBay or you're selling something, anything. You're selling something, where you're selling a service, selling a product, selling anything. Selling yourself as a brand. If there's an obvious weakness, like an obvious weakness, I'm not talking about something that you're working on in the backgrounds that someone have to dig up to know about. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about an obvious weakness. Say, for instance, matter of fact, I'm listening to an audiobook now. And I'll talk about that later, but one of the first things this dude, in his introduction, one of the first things he does is talk about, now, and the way he mentioned it is in his shout out. When he was doing his introduction, his shout out, right? Shout out to his, family, whatever. He mentioned his people that answer his collect calls while he was in the joint. So right there, I was like, okay, this dude done some time. I was like, all right, so what he did, he was locked up in a drunk tank. No, this dude spent some serious time. So automatically, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to this dude because he has a right to talk about whatever he's got, he got my attention now because he's been through something I haven't been through. So now he's just put himself up a notch on credibility for me. That's just the way I am. It may be some other gauge with you. You may have another gauge. If I'm talking, like when I was in the military, and actually right when I got out, when I met my wife, we were dating, and I was talking to dudes who were still active duty, and I was like, man, I think this is gonna be my wife, and some people kind of figured it out because I had changed my course. I had a job lined up that I kind of changed my course. And then it was all these people talking about, man, marriage is the worst thing you could do. And these were all divorced people. All divorced people, right? Either divorced or people who hadn't been married. That's who was telling me this. And then the married people that were giving me advice, I like the married people or the people who had been married like a second time. Matter of fact, I don't think I even talked to anybody who had been married, who was on their first marriage and was still married. It was people who got married either early or married the wrong person and messed up, and then got married. Oh no, I lied. There was one person who was married who had been married for like 20 years. And I think I mentioned him. He was the same guy that actually gave me my first book while I was still active duty, first book on real estate. And he just told me, just make sure, man. He's like, this is a guy who's been married like 20, 30 years and had like 10 kids. And he was like, make sure this is the right person. He was like, don't marry due to convenience, because my wife at the time, she only worked right down the hall from me. And he was like, make sure it's not that. Make sure it's just not, this puppy love type stuff. But I took his advice more to heart than anybody else. The people who've never been married, I'm like, okay, I'm not listening to you. People who have been not divorced one time, like 3 times, I'm like, dude, you can probably give me advice if I was married and going through a divorce. You can probably give me advice on that, but you can't give me no advice on marriage. You don't know how to do it right. You know what I mean? I mean, you can give me some advice on what not to do if you want to stay married, but I'm not taking your advice all that well if you don't know how to stick to a marriage. So if someone had came to me and said, hey, I know I was married before and I got divorced. I'm married now and it's working. Let me tell you how I messed up the first one. Then I can listen to that guy. But you can't come to me trying to give me advice on marriage, and then I later find out that you've been married 3, 4, 5 times and you can never make it work. I just can't listen to you. So that's what I mean by obvious stuff. I'm not saying like if you are giving a speech and the first thing you get up there and start talking about is like, say you're giving a speech on film photography, right? You're gonna give me a speech on film photography, how to. You can't get up there and you've only been doing it 3 months. You can, that's well within your right, but you got to get up there and say, now let me tell you what I've learned in the 3 months I've been processing my own film and shooting my own film. That's how you start it out. You don't start it out like you an expert, you a guru, and then I found out this dude's only been doing it for 3 months. That's how people lose their credibility. That's how you like lose all, like, I can't mess with you anymore.